It's your town.
I want it now and I ain't never gonna back down.
Your time. Who do you want to be?
I am no regular citizen. Do you understand what you witnessing?
Find your voice.
Now I'm fired up.
Conceive.
I came from the ashes, I rise up.
Design. Create. And make yourself heard.
I gotta go for the gold.
Speak to the world. Express your mind. Be what you want to be. Be you. S&P Work Lab. Let your voice be heard.
Came from the ashes, I rise up.
Changing laws won't change our hearts, and hate won't leave unless we make it.
This divide is real.
And you might feel hopeless to overtake it.
Our history's cold.
Our future's unknown and incomplete.
But we could fight today.
To make the pain of our past not repeat.
Wherever you are.
Be that change you feel that you don't see enough of.
Your household, school,
friends,
or job could grow through your life.
We need tough love.
Need kindness and care.
Conversations to understand each other.
Patience for these wounds.
And day-by-day actions to love our brothers.
Help our sisters of all races.
To connect and not dismiss.
And be that country we're supposed to be.
Where each life can exist.
And it's through you to call out hatred.
Teach the weak.
And shield the pain.
No matter who you are, your life could shine a path. Be
the change.
Hello, my name is Tony Sias, and I'm honored to be hosting S&P Work Lab's first ever live Capitalizing the Bee webinar. S&P Work Lab Ohio Be the Change campaign is the brainchild of CEO and founder Renee Singleton. The campaign aims to encourage anti-racism education and support today's anti-racism movement through video production, content creation, and the report initiative Capitalizing the Bee. The purpose of Capitalizing the Bee is to enlighten readers about anti-Black racism in America and identify its historical precedents. S&P Work Lab aims to equip individuals with the tools and knowledge to be better implement anti-racism practices in their lives. Today, we are going to discuss the topics that are part of the first 3 releases of Capitalizing the Bee. I want to thank all of you for joining us. We have a short period of time, only an hour, so we're going to get started. Let's meet our panelists. Renee Coffer is a committed anti-racist and co-conspirator. She's a mom, sister, grandmother who works as a multimedia consultant for Spectrum Reach. Renee co-founded the New Life Serenity Center in 2018 to serve women building a new life for themselves in sobriety. Renee is also a singer committed to a vision of life where diverse communities thrive in service of each other. Cherie Rivera is an urban activist and performing vocalist. She's best known for her 10-plus years of work as an influencer and social change agent in urban communities. Cherie has led inner-city communities action initiatives in Chicago, Detroit, Minneapolis, and throughout the city of Los Angeles. With a BBA in music business, she is professionally trained in music and video production, creative design, songwriting, content development, music publishing, theater, dance, and public speaking. Tim Shusano started his career at ABC Sports in live sports production with a focus on the integrated marketing side of business. As a husband for 16 years and father, Tim currently lives in Brooklyn and leads a 240-person production team and creative team. Jacqueline Topping is a business strategist, researcher, and writer who focuses on Black American culture, demographics, and psychographics. She's also the author of Capitalizing the Bee. Jacqueline has provided consumer insight, research, and data analysis to a wide variety of companies, nonprofits, and publications for more than 25 years. It is truly a pleasure to be with all of you today. Now we're going to begin our panel discussion, and after that, we're going to have a Q&A session with our audience. So, let's start with Tim. Tim, to the best of your memory, describe the point in time and how old you were when you first understood that there were differences between Black people and white people. And do you remember how that made you feel?
Good morning, everybody. First, I just wanted to thank you for having me as a part of this. It's a privilege to be part of the conversation. So thank you for having me here in the first place. This question gave me a lot to reflect on. You know, it goes to some of your earliest memories as a child, maybe look through pictures, and I'm fortunate in how I was raised that it gave me a lot of context that really led to the answer to the question happening last year. And as I was starting to have some very candid conversations with my closest friends who were Black about what was happening in the country, there was one conversation that hit me that I kept coming back to as the answer for this question. I was standing in my backyard and we were discussing what was happening in the country, and my friend said to me, he said, Tim, you need to understand that this is a white person problem. And as that sank in, a flood of thoughts that included the realization of statements like hard work pays off and sentiments along those lines that all of a sudden now have an asterisk. As somebody who, you know, is, I think, pretty easy to make the argument that I've enjoyed white privilege because I'm a white person and because of the surroundings in which I've grown up in, and I am privileged in my job. I'm privileged in so many ways. The stark realization of the difference in that specific moment, and having an understanding that there are so many things that we have talked about, and there are so many things that I had learned, and there are so many things that I believed in, that there was still this gap, and so that forever changed my perspective and understanding to take me from a mindset of I am aware, I understand, to and what I found most compelling in being part of the conversation and reading Capitalize the B was, how do I use my privilege to act? And so for me, that was the answer to the question. That it was not until I was in my early 40s, and that distinct moment. And again, as somebody who is, you know, feels like I've had solid awareness, but I have understood that I've had gaps. But that conversation in particular was kind of the watershed moment for me that kind of led to some of the realizations and, you know, candidly part of probably being here today.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you. Cherie, do you remember learning about the history of the enslavement of Black Africans during the founding and growth of America? And did you learn about the post-war Jim Crow era, Ku Klux Klan, or about segregation when you were in school?
So that's a big question. Again, thank you for having me. Capitalize the B is, man, this report has been a part of my continued learning. So thank you so much, S&P Work Lab, for putting this out. Because in school, I would say no. I would say that slavery was mentioned when I was in school, but it was framed as something of the past. It was definitely not looked upon fondly. But at the same time, I went to a school where the trend at the time was that many white males would have the Confederate flag in their truck, you know, right in their window. And I feel like, honestly, if history were being taught accurately, this type of trend would have been shut down, or Maybe it was just telling of what we know now, especially after Trump's leadership and witnessing the insurrection, that white supremacy is alive and well. And the Confederacy mentality has not ceased to exist post the Civil War, but instead it's hidden in the shadows, and it awaits every opportunity to rear its ugly head. I wish I would have known more about my history accurately when I was younger, because I think being I'm mixed race, so I'm white and black, right? So growing up in the Midwest as a mixed kid, I lived in tension often, and I didn't know how to speak about what I was feeling. And I think it's important for you to know your true history so that you can actually gain agency over your life and find your voice to make change. And so that's the work I've been doing post my education on my own. I would say a game changer for me was really learning how America was formed and really looking at the American Revolution, right? And understanding, oh, July 4th isn't really like the thing that we should be celebrating for all people. Understanding manifest destiny, and understanding that literally this was done in the name of God, right? Like kicking out and enslaving millions of Africans and abusing and displacing indigenous people to gain more territory in the name of God, in the name of power, to form our country. And then understanding the Civil War and understanding what the Confederacy means and how that the North may have been defeated at that time, but the spirit and the mentality of the Confederacy is still alive and well. And so when we talk about making change, you have to know these fundamentals, because then you can start to be able to understand why the war on our voting rights right now that we're facing is a big deal. And it's rooted somewhere, right? And we have to protect the progress that we have made, but you can't protect progress if you don't know what progress has been made. Right. So for me, it's been amazing, just post education, my educational experience, learning on my own, and then feeling like I have more power and agency. I would say the other thing to your question about did I learn about KKK and Jim Crow? Absolutely not. And I think that's why a lot of white supremacists are shaking in their boots right now with this whole critical race theory conversation. Because they're afraid of truth. They don't want the real history and the real understanding of the systems that are set up against Blacks in America to be exposed, because then it would hinder their agenda. And so I've learned about it again post my education, and I would suggest a few movies to those who are listening today. I learned about this more through 13th. It's a movie on Netflix, and let's see, I had it written down. The Black Klansman. Those have been very, very fundamental in my learning. So yeah, that's where I learned, and that's what I've learned.
Well, thank you so much, and we all should stay in a continuous state of improvement, continuing to learn and grow from the ongoing research that's there. So thank you so much, Cherie. Renee, some people describe themselves as allies of the Black Lives Matter movement or claim solidarity with Black people in general. What does the term ally mean to you, and how can one become an ally of Black people or of the anti-racist movement in general?
I just want to say thank you to Renee Singleton for this project, for this paper. I want to thank you, Jacqueline, for the wonderful work that you did. Thank you, Cherie. Thank you, Tony, for hosting this. And thank you so much, Tim, for being who you are in our organization. And I'm learning this. I don't have a degree in this. And 2 years ago, I didn't know that my blindness, what I thought was an asset, sort of what I would have called my color blindness, was nonsense. I did not know that. I grew up in a family where the racism was in the background, and we were not racist. That was like the conversation. But basically what we're speaking about is conversation between people. And I was unaware that by being someone on the sidelines thinking of myself as not racist, I was participating in a culture and a systemic value system that existed. There is no sitting back. I think Tim said it earlier, it isn't about what you think, it's about what you do. And so I'm going to say an ally has a lot of uncomfortable conversations. An ally stands alongside people that, like for me, I see as brothers and sisters, while knowing I do not share a family experience with them, because I don't know what it's like. When I was younger and I would get pulled over in a car, I would sometimes be helped home by an officer when I was out of line. I don't know what it's like to be thrown in jail because of a busted out taillight. I don't know what it's like to have a conversation. My son is 20. I didn't have to have a conversation with him when he was 15 years old about how to behave if you ever get pulled over by a police officer, and always keep both hands on the wheel. So it started with reading. What is it to be an ally? Get educated. You know, this paper was wonderful, Jacqueline, because you encapsulated a lot of the things that I had been reading about for the past 2 years, and really put it so succinctly, like the responsibility myth, the respectability myth, the idea that if someone's just respectable, they're going to make their way in the world, you know. No, not if you're dealing with systemic racism. No, that's not true. And the New Jim Crow is a really brilliant book that's been around for 10 years. I didn't know that book existed. I'm now reading, I think, what is her 4th edition with her prefaces, and Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, talks about mass incarceration. What is it to be an ally is to understand that the enslavement of people has shifted to incarceration. And okay, so now what I do with that? Well, I'm going to have some conversations with people. I live in Westlake, Ohio, with the Westlake Police Department. I'm going to have them know me and know how I feel, and know that we've got to dismantle. I have a conversation with my daughter about this all the time. Do we need to completely dismantle the police force? I don't know. If it truly was instituted to corral people of color, could corral Black men and women who might have been out of a job, maybe we do need to dismantle it. I don't have the intelligence or the experience to say, but I am going to be part of those conversations. So for me, being an ally is listening really carefully. I'm going to listen to what you say, Tony. I'm going to listen to what you say, Jacqueline and Cherie. I'm going to be less full of my own ideas. You know, also, I think for me, being an ally means researching. And a paper like this one, which is very simple to read, very easy to comprehend, sends you in directions of learning more, it's a gem. So you want to get your hands on that paper and read it. I'm in conversations regularly with my family. I am in conversations regularly with my friends, and I'm starting to date. And on one of the very first questions on a video chat I'm asking is, what kind of books do you read? Because I'm not interested in somebody who's not going to be reading these books. So real life, in my life, that's what it looks like.
Well, thank you so much.
And that's really all I got.
Well, that's plenty, Renee, and I think we're going to come back to some more questions shortly. Tim, we're going to circle back over to you. What did you learn about anti-Black racism and racist history of America from capitalizing the B report? And did anything surprise you?
I was surprised, and I don't know if surprise might be the best word. I was refreshed. I was recalibrated. I was made more aware, for lack of better descriptions. There were so many thoughts that flooded my mind as I went through it the first time and the second time, and even digesting it again last night in preparation for this. The biggest headline, and what I would hope that anybody takes away from it, even if they just take a look at the headline or just having the awareness that this exists, is the notion specifically of anti-Black racism, and the entire concept of the difference between bigotry and racism. Like, these are some key fundamental things that I think when you understand it and how intelligently they were written to just make it very clear as to the distinction between power plus bigotry equaling racism versus just this simple notion of having some sort of distinct angle because of somebody else's color, background, etc. Like that is huge, because when it comes to, in my humble opinion, when it comes to shifting mindsets, there's that fundamental need to get people away from this kind of two-way clash, because it's not. If we're being honest with ourselves, it's not. There needs to be an understanding of that distinct difference. So like that in and of itself was one of the biggest elements. How racism manifests was also key, again, from kind of like a fundamental core understanding. Things that made perfect sense. You kind of look through and how it manifests, and kind of, putting things into specific buckets of, somebody's background, why they might be in a specific category, from a racism perspective, and starting to get a sense of understanding why people, not necessarily why they might be the way they are, but then how to have conversations based on what their perspective might be. Like the notion of the bubble, right? Like that, I think that is another crisp one that needs to be understood, because while we are a big, diverse country, it is very easy to be in bubbles. It's very easy to be in a bubble in New York City, depending on what neighborhood you're in. It's very easy to be in a bubble in New York City and be somebody that commutes in from outside the city and sees Grand Central Station and then sees their office in Midtown and goes back and has to the larger point of, like, if you are aware, or if you think you're just simply not racist, that is not helpful. And how do we change the conversation to be one that is helpful? And then there were some elements around, especially in the healthcare industry, and some specific elements within Capitalizing the B about frontline workers and how things have kind of tiered into creating what was happening around COVID specifically for Black people, because of things that had been systemic that led up to that point, that then had a larger population of frontline workers that were Black people, and then the impact on that community that then ties all the way back to things from a historic perspective. So there were both these grandiose yet really simple contextual elements that rang huge bells in my head, and then also really specific things, so that if I was having a conversation with a relative or a friend and there was anything that I needed to kind of point to say, had you thought about this? Did you understand? Do you understand why COVID is having the impact on the Black community that it's having? So it was incredible for a lot of reasons. It is not easy to take a very complex set of elements the history, the current day, the language around all of it, and simplify it in a way that is digestible. But if you have not read these, they need to be read. Like this is classroom elements that I think from just a human perspective should be things that people sit down and literally go paragraph by paragraph and read them and have conversations about them because of how crisp and how smart and direct it is. But those were some of the key takeaways for me.
Hey, thank you, Tim. I want to underscore something that everybody has said thus far. Jacqueline, you've done an incredible job with this report, and I'm just so excited to hear from you. So, from your experience in researching anti-Black racism and collaborating with the S&P Work Lab, what do you believe we need to exist to truly end anti-Black racism?
Well, first I would like to say the things that everyone said here today were so profound. And I also would like to thank everyone who had input into editing and helping me, tighten up some of the themes that I tried to present. Renee and Tim in particular did some pretty heavy editorial work and helped me because they are the audience. Cherie is the audience. I want it's like, how are you seeing this? And I'm a different generation than some people, and I wanted to make sure it was universal, and there was a lot of help there. So thank you very much. Back to the question, I believe, like other things in the world, that ending all racism is going to always just be a work in progress. I don't think we'll ever get to a point where everybody on the planet loves everybody else. However, I think that just like everything else in history, and certainly the history of enslaved Africans in America, it is a process. So, and we were speaking about this within my family the other day. When we think of how far we've come in, since 1619, that our ancestors survived the Middle Passage, and they came here and survived broken up families and violence and illness. Then going through Jim Crow and all these times when these things were happening, attitudes among European white Americans was changing as well. Okay, so and then there were some people who never were supporting slavery, but the process, the proportion of people changed a lot. The civil rights movement made a huge leap that jump-started a lot of Black people and jumped them forward. So, and then there's progress there. I think it's going to be like that forever. But to Tim's point, you were talking about the George Floyd murder last year, and then the awareness that so many people got about racist police practices during that time. And so I think there will always be historic events, sadly, like what happened with George Floyd, or much earlier what happened with Trayvon Martin, which kicked off an awareness. That I think it's like baby steps. Every time something happens, maybe a few more people become aware. Renee made a very good point when she said, if you're going to be an ally, you're going to have some painful conversations, and that's very true. Tim said that his friend said that racism was really a white people problem, and that's true as well. Martin Luther King also said that. It's not to cast blame, but to understand that the culture, the European American culture, is what fosters this. And so we can't keep saying, please like us, please don't do this. Please. I mean, eventually the other person's got to decide they're not going to have a problem with you. Renee also spoke about the downside of colorblindness. To tell me that you don't see my color tells me that you don't see who I am, because my race is part of who I am. My gender is part of who I am. And to say I won't see these things about you implies that that it's bad, so I'll just ignore it, like you would ignore a scar or a disability, or try to, that's not really what's going on. So that was a really good statement as well, Renee. And so, just starting to get there, starting to understand that Allyship is not conditional. If you're going to be my ally, you're going to be my ally even on a day that I'm angry and I might say something that hurts your feelings, but it's because I'm hurting and not because I'm attacking. And then it's not like then tomorrow I'm not going to be your friend if you don't say these nice things to me. So it's very complex. Excuse me. It's very complex. It's an ongoing process. People who are coming into this space of anti-racism and anti-Black racism in particular are learning things about their own attitudes that they may not have realized. And I'll say another thing, because we did speak of this, the division of anti-Black racism versus anti-racism, and both of those are equally important. One of the reasons that I wanted to separate that and speak to anti-Black racism is that Black people experience racism from other people of color as well. And those are historical things, whether it's, the Latino community or whether it's the Asian community. And particularly, we've had some issues with the Asian community back and forth. So I wanted to be very specific. Also, the racism that's been perpetrated against Black people has a history, with that history beginning in slavery and going through Reconstruction and Jim Crow. There's never been a time in America where Black people were not considered less from the minute the first Black slave landed in this country. The same thing with the Native Americans, with the indigenous people. So that history has to be, it helps for people to understand that history in that context, because then you can see how things start making sense. You can see, why is this like this? Another thing that Martin Luther King said is, how can we pull ourselves up by our bootstraps when we don't have any boots? How can you serve in the military and come out and not get the GI Bill, which is what happened after World War II? Now you wonder why there's a difference in wealth. That started in the 40s, when some people got college loans and home loans and Black people did not. When during the New Deal, white people got Medicare and Black people did not. So when we want to see where we are today, we have to understand that the deck was not equal. Even as things were happening that were making this country a great nation, it was still making it a great nation specifically for white people and white men in particular. So, if we don't understand that history, we will never be able to understand the other attitudes. One of the other things I notice, and I'm online a bit in the social media world, is whenever there's a video of police brutality, someone getting stopped for, a broken taillight, the next thing you know, they're on the ground and 5 policemen are on them and beating them. And you'll always have somebody come in and, well, I'm not a racist, but I need to see what happened before that. And to hear that as a Black person is like, what you literally are thinking that there's an occurrence that could justify what I'm looking at. And so I'm, just supposing, that we're just innately criminal. And so I've just got to see if the criminal thing that this person did is bad enough to deserve this beating, derails the whole conversation. So that's the kind of thing that we need people to look at about themselves. When you even think there's a reason that could be okay, and let me see what happened before to see if this is okay. That's the kind of thing that is going to be a work in progress, to go back and question someone and say, so you really think there's something that just help them get to that point without anger or whatever, but just those things help open their mind and see a way of thinking that someone may not understand. And some of that comes from the bubble, as Tim said. If you don't know people, you think everybody's a criminal and you don't know anyone as an individual. People do go to work and come home, and the only Black people they see are, through the girl that works in accounting and somebody else, and then that's the only Black people they ever see, or the only Latino people they ever see, or the only gay people that they ever see. And so you don't know everything. And that was, I think, my whole purpose of this idea just to kind of, get some baseline concept. We're producing, and I'm actually writing right now, the next report, which is on policing and law enforcement. So a deep dive into that. We're going to do a deep dive into healthcare. And we're also doing one into wealth, into money and financials. So we will look at all these topics that we're talking about here in greater depth. And then there's also historical context in there. And then I want to make one more point for Cherie, and then I'll give it back. You said when you were talking about learning about slavery, there are literally textbooks now that imply almost that the enslaved Africans were more like migrant workers, or that they came over here to help out. And that framework doesn't help people really understand the brutality of chattel slavery, of not even being a citizen, not even being literally owned, is not the same thing as a migrant worker. And they did not come over here to help out. They didn't even know here was here. So, that's just crazy. And to help dispel that kind of thing, I think that's going to take a while. But I think if people are open to it, and I seem to see more of it in the younger generations in particular, I think we'll make some more progress, a nice big leap like we did in the 60s. And I think we actually could do something like that and help everybody. So I'll hand it back to you on that, Tony.
Thank you very much. And I do think that Capitalizing the B is a very accessible report that gives a historical context. And I do think that it's important that all of our viewers take a moment and really study the report and look at many of the things around history that are in that report, because accurate truth around history is really so important for us being the change that we want to see and moving people and generations forward. So now that we've discussed these topics amongst each other, let's answer some questions from the audiences. So if you have a question, you should type it into the chat, and we'll take a few questions momentarily. All right. Oh, here you go. All right, one question. I'm going to just ask each of the panelists to answer that question. And do you believe anti-Black racism will ever be resolved in your lifetime? And I'm going to start with you, Cherie.
So we've had this whole conversation, and I feel like people that are listening are probably running in circles in their mind because we gave so much information, and there really is a lot of information in these reports. So I just want to bring it back to the foundation before we answer that question, because that's a big question. So you have to know what racism is in the first place. So I liked this quote that was in the report by Alicia Garza, who's one of the founders of the Black Lives Matter movement. Too many people still think that racism is what happens when people are mean to each other. But racism has nothing to do with people being mean to each other, and has everything to do with rules that are rigged to keep those designated as the other away from the resources and power they need to live well. It has nothing to do with being mean to each other. And I think that's so important when you understand that it's systemic. And that's been the whole conversation that we've been having, especially for the last 2 years and leading up to the elections. Is somebody going to really recognize that racism is systemic? That it's not just an attitude, that it's not just somebody being mean and saying the wrong thing sometimes at a party, right? That there are actually systems and structures that need to be dismantled, that need to be reformed. So with that, I would say, do I think that racism could be ended in my lifetime? There was another thing in the report that said, you have to commit to it. You have to, if you're going to be an ally, if you're going to do this work, you have to commit to it for a lifetime. I know I have. Do I have faith that the critical mass that we need right now in America to end racism, do I think that we have enough people fighting? No. 50% of America still believes in the structure. We've got to get over that. We've got to have more critical mass to see the change. Do I think it's worth fighting for? Yes. Do I hope to see it in my lifetime? Yes. Do I think we've come a long way? Yes. Do I think we're in the second civil rights movement? Yes. Do I hope people understand that and see that and put the effort that our ancestors put behind it, that our Martin Luther King and other activists put behind it? Yes. All I can do is hope. And all I can do is keep leading and have that spirit that MLK had, which is I have a dream. And I've just got to keep dreaming. And I've got to keep sharing that dream through music and media and art. We've got to keep reading about what was and then dreaming of a world that could be. And that's me as an artist. That's all I can do. I hope. That's all I can say is that I hope. But we have a long way to go. We just had an insurrection. Like, people literally just took over the Capitol. I mean, it's crazy. We're literally, our voting rights are on the line again. Again. So we're at the Olympics and Black girls can't wear caps that will cover their hair. I hope, but we have a long way to go still.
Yeah, there's much work to be done. So thank you. Thank you so very much. Renee, I'm going to ask you to respond to that as well. Do you believe anti-Black racism will be resolved in your lifetime?
Can I just ditto everything Cherie just said?
Yes, we all can.
My heart wants to. So look, I learned really the first book that I read that kind of set me looking for books was White Fragility. And I know there was a lot of controversy about that because it was written by a white woman and, you know, people were worried about her making money on it and all of that. I was grateful that she wrote it. I was grateful that it was a book that could be read in a suburban book club and that there was a wake up that came out of that. I feel like there's leverage points that we don't understand that go beyond our current understanding. And if we begin one, shoulder to shoulder, one person at a time, we begin this, it's more of a spiritual march than a physical march. You know, there's an opportunity to ask ourselves in the morning, how am I going to step forward today? What's going to be the step I take today on this path? And I believe in leverage points. I believe there's opportunities when suddenly the fish sees the water. You know, I was a fish in water. Hey, how's the water, Renee? I don't know. What water? You know, oh, wait, I'm in water. I am immersed in systemic racism. What is that? I don't know, but I better find the freak out because it's not okay with me. It's not okay with my heart, my mind, my soul, my body. So now what? I don't know. But what can I do today? It's going to be a conversation. It's going to be a book that I read. It's going to be something I share. I'm going to hear something somebody says, and I don't know. I gotta believe in that leverage point. Talking about the world here. It's not just the United States of America, although even Hitler thought we were a little too strong in executing our caste system, which is bizarre to me. There are opportunities to move forward, and I believe in them. So keeping my feet on the ground, watching my own steps, and asking for others, what are you up to in this regard? How does it feel to you? What kinds of things are you looking at and investigating? You know, our organization, the companies that we do business with, the people in our lives. I want to say, yes, I believe in our lifetime. I know that's absurd, okay? I still want to say yes.
All right, well, thank you, and I appreciate the optimism. Tim, your response?
I can't help but think that my response is somewhat irrelevant because it's only about what I can do. Again, in a ditto manner to what has already been stated, it's about the doing, and in a similar way, like I would love to believe that. I would love to be able to see like clearly on paper, like here are the steps, and that specifically within these time ranges, so that within my lifespan, which obviously has a finite window, or even my daughter's lifespan that has a finite window, that these things will happen to get us to this place. I could map it out. I could take my best swag based on what I know and start to put things down that if I were to ever run for office, if I were to ever have, large control of, massive decisions that could be made and implemented, part of what I do on a day in and day out basis, just simply because of the size of the team that I run is based off of, process and strategy. And so from like that kind of mindset, I can see at a high level, again, I'm not going to give myself enough credit to be like, oh, I could, fix it, or I could put ideas, but I could map things out. I could have that conversation. I can specifically look at, because of the fact that this is systemic, that means that there are, as noted multiple times, there are rules, there are laws, there are literally systems that need to be changed. Changing systems should not be that difficult. It really shouldn't. The one of the most difficult parts of this, from like the frustration from some, a person of white privilege that is looking at all of this, is the fact that we are choosing to let this be something that we still have to solve for. Like that, we have so many problems in this world, and we have specifically chosen to have this set up in this way, and now be in a position where we're having these conversations. The things that we could be doing to solve for to get on for like global pieces, to me it's really sad. So I'm willing to say that I will do everything that I can, because there are small and large things that I can do on a daily basis, literally every single day, that I will do, because I even have a hard time saying ally. Like I want to earn that. I want to be in the doing. I would like to see the world significantly change, because these are problems that are solvable. They're not easy, and they will take a while, but these are things that we can fix if we actually sat down and started fixing them.
Thank you. Jacqueline, I'm going to ask the same question. Do you believe anti-Black racism will resolve in your lifetime? But in addition to that, what's the most important thing to remember in supporting anti-Black racism?
Okay, I'll take the second question first.
All righty.
And we've sort of touched on it already. This, whether we call it allyship or not, understanding that it's not something that you can jump in and out of. It's something that you have to actively desire and want. And I say that because, and to understand, I guess this is the second part of what I'm trying to say, to understand these systems. So if you're being an ally, understand the system itself. Start getting politically active. Start putting people in office that understand the context of the racist systems that are in this country already and are committed to dismantling those systems. We have some people right now that are screaming almost too extremely is, no police at all or something. That'll solve the problem, but it really won't. It will create vigilantism on one level. And the other thing to remember is that, well, of course I have to tell it, but I can't remember it. The other thing to remember is that there is actual crime. And so law enforcement in its truest context in apprehending, suspected criminals and them going through the justice system is not necessarily a bad system. There are criminals, thieves, but first, the problem that we have now with the police, for example, the system of policing is the police are the judge, jury, and executioner. They've decided when they pull up to my car that I'm already guilty, and they even carry out a sentence. And that part of policing is very broken. So that's a system that totally needs to be re-examined. Some things that they deal with may not even need to have police presence. I'll say this, I just got a camera ticket when I was driving on a turnpike. And as upset as I was that they took a picture of my car and sent me the ticket, I also was really happy that I didn't have to interact with any police in another state. And so there are some things in the world, license plates, broken taillights. Why don't you just take a picture of their license plate and send them a ticket? We don't have to have an interaction with the police about that. So minimizing just the interaction of the police, changing the system of every single thing being approaching and starting that could be a way to start. But in order to do those things, you've got to put a mayor in office, a city council in office, and we'll talk about this more. You've got to talk about these police unions, but that's a whole other conversation. But that system of policing and access to more times when you're dealing with this authoritarian thing need to change. I'm going to go back to the politics then again for a minute, because no systems will change without that. It's important to understand that in 1964, white people didn't suddenly decide, I guess we won't be racist anymore. The Civil Rights Act had to literally change the system, and people behaved their way into less racism and less systems. And so it's not about us waiting for everybody to be willing for this, because that's not going to happen. The systems are going to have to change, and people will behave in different ways, and that will change their attitude. Behaving a different way is a precedent to having a different attitude. Thinking a different way is a precedent to having another attitude. It's not the reverse. It's not that you just suddenly decide you're not going to be racist. It's that you're going to see your kids going to school with little black kids and be like, oh, that's not so bad. And little Jerome there, he's actually a nice little boy, and he can play the piano better than my son. I mean, it's got to get there, but you've got to have that type of change in systems first and get out of that bubble. And everybody's not going to get out of the bubble. I would love to believe everybody in the world, but I think that's unrealistic. But to have a majority of people have all you have to have is a more benevolent view of others.
Yes.
That's it. And then everything else comes out of that mindset. And to get people just there, they may still have this or that prejudice. They may still, not like girls with blonde hair because they think whatever. But it helps change these systems. It helps them understand the bigger things that are holding some people back. One of the biggest things that I find in people who are seeking to be anti-racist is the acceptance of the fact that the opposite is I'm literally getting privilege at the cost of someone else. So that's the white privilege part. It isn't that all white people are millionaires, which some people want to say. No, it's that if you are in an incident with the police and I am, you are going to get the benefit of the doubt by default. That is a privilege, and that's a privilege no matter what your living circumstances are. And even, I'm sure there are incidences where white homeless people are treated as more benevolent and benign than a black homeless person who would be immediately looked at as a threat. So, it's the mindset and sometimes though the systems have to make people behave in a different way to change their mindset.
All right.
I'll use one more example and then I'll give it back. Some white people have become less racist because they have biracial grandchildren. And they suddenly are interacting with another family. They're interacting and loving this granddaughter, even though she's, biracial. And so that's like a behaving their way into a different point of view. And that's kind of more, it's like when it happens, then some people will change their mind. So I think the change in the system has to happen first.
Thank you.
And I'll hand it back.
Thank you, Jacqueline. So as we wrap things up, I want to ask all the panelists this final question. What's the one thing you want the audience to do as a result of this eye-opening conversation? Let's start with you, Renee.
Well, keep listening. Recognize just the possibility that maybe there's some things that you're interacting with that you don't understand. Get really curious to learn more. There was sort of a process to the discovery for me. You know, white fragility led to caste. I was part of it goes on weekly, but I was attending about every other week a conversation called Race as a Conversation. What does that look like? We're reading books, and there's really brutal series on HBO that was Exterminate the Brutes. Highly recommend. People's History of the United States, incredible book that just sort of laid out the world of anti-racism. So I would say get curious, read, and share. Share. And you're going to be uncomfortable, and it's okay.
All right, thank you. Jacqueline, what would you like the audience to remember or do or take away from this conversation?
I think that what I want them to take away is for people who are trying to become anti-racist, try not to take things personally. Try not to take statements or revelations that you're going to come across in your reading and in your conversations as personal attacks or as anti-white or reverse racism or hatred of whites. Understand that, yes, there are benefits in this generation. No, you didn't do what, Robert E. Lee did, but there's this whole gray area in between there where we've got to come to an understanding about what happened and what happened to whom and who did that to whom, because it helps us understand going forward. And I think that's about all I have, Tony.
Awesome. Cherie, what's the one thing you want the audience to do as a result of this conversation?
The one thing is to live in the tension. And so what do I mean by that? I'd have to read from MLK. And he said, I've almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in the stride towards freedom is not the white citizens counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I can't agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically feels he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by the myth of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait until a more convenient season. He wrote that, said that, April 1963. This idea of tension is so important. And we've got to hold the tension, and it's so hard. It's so hard to live in the tension, but it is what is necessary for true liberation, freedom, and peace to come. So live in the tension. Also, please be empathetic. Black people have been traumatized and are still being traumatized. We are tired, we are hurting, and we're fed up, and we need you to understand how we're coming to the table, and that when we come to the table, it's a gift, because we are having to put down so much trauma, so much pain. we have to operate in so much resilience just to show up every day in our right mind. So please have some empathy and understand the tension we're holding is greater than you could ever imagine.
Amen.
Thank you, Cherie. Thank you. And another amen. We have only 30 seconds, Tim, so I'm going to ask you to give your response in 30 seconds.
Read these papers, read Capitalizing the Bee, ask yourself about your core morals are. And if you believe in your core morals, have an understanding that there are rules and regulations that exist in our country that we can change and that have to change for us to make change in this space.
Thank you. Thank you to all the panelists for this straightforward and honest and candid conversation. This completes S&P's Work Lab's first Capitalizing the Bee webinar. Though this was a live event, the program will now be available on the website ohiobethechange.com. Follow S&P Work Lab on all social media platforms and stay updated on upcoming events. And remember, you too can be the change.